But let's move on. I would love to get your thoughts on well, first of all, on the Veep stakes, because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on about thoughts, uh, analysis, because let's face it, this is a unique situation where Trump, because he's running for a second term, the vice president is going to be in only the second time in history in of being in the position of being the heir apparent after one term. And then you throw on top of that the fact that Trump is not going to put someone who's going to I think there's two criteria that are steadfast. He's not going to put someone in there who's going to outshine him, i.e., Nikki Haley. So there's no way he's going to choose Nikki Haley. I'd say that's about a 0.001 chance. And he doesn't want to take any chance that this person is not going to be 110% loyal. In other words, he's not going to have someone like Mike Pence who might do the right thing unexpectedly the way he did on January 6th. So given those two criteria, and of course there are many more, who do you think are the top two or three choices for Donald Trump's vice presidential candidate? And I have to say, before you answer, knowing Trump, this is where I give him credit, it's all about the show. I'm sure there's going to be endless parading of candidates and all these interviews and the sycophancy and the groveling and the dear leader-esque praise and all that before it happens. So what say you, my dear Carrie?
Well, I agree with you that I think he is going to draw this out. It's going to be a reality show, kind of like a game of Survivor or a game of, Celebrity Apprentice, of who is going to be my celebrity apprentice in the White House. And a friend of mine who is at Fox Business and the New York Post, he sent me some reporting that and he knows a lot of people close to Trump. The list, according to his current sourcing, is in this order of likelihood: J.D. Vance, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Elise Stefanik. Those are the top three candidates from his reporting, but obviously we know this could change. The thing about J.D. Vance is he owes everything to Trump for his Senate seat. He was floundering in the primary in Ohio. I remember a friend of mine was close friends with one of J.D. Vance's opponent in the primary, and he was starting to overshadow him. But then Trump came in and endorsed JD, and then his fortunes turned, and now he's got his Senate seat. So he is very loyal to Trump, and I think that's the number one quality that Trump wants for this is loyal. And you're right, he also doesn't want someone who's going to outshine him. And so I think the fact that Sarah Huckabee Sanders has worked for him before, that she helped amplify him, certainly, and that her father is a very famous last name within the Republican Party, that's a lot of loyalty. With Stefanik, I've known her almost a decade. She she's she's perceived within the base as not being particularly solid, that she was more of a, no offense, like a Rockefeller Republican, which is to say more of like an establishment or a part of the deep state kind of thing. But because she is representing a very conservative district, she came around and became very supportive of Trump. And the fact that she's got very strong visibility right now with Claudine Gay puts her in a good position. And she just campaigned with Trump this week on the campaign trail. So he's going to be having a lot of auditions on the campaign trail with these candidates. And I personally think if he was watching our show, I would recommend that he picks Tim Scott. I think Tim Scott can be a really good contrast for him in terms of having that sunny optimism, that Ronald Reagan-esque personality. And it was no coincidence that Tim Scott endorsed him this week. So I think Tim Scott is certainly open to that. So what do you think?
Well, before I answer that, let me just push back on one thing. Elise Stefanik did not come around because she was from a very conservative district. She came around because she is the most tragic and reprehensible example of how the Republican Party has become the cult of Trump. And there is no better case of someone who just threw every value and principle they had out the window for power. And so I must admit, I think she is deplorable. But what she does have is she has that killer style about her, and Trump loves that. And I think the most underrated thing that he may be looking for is someone that can go after Kamala Harris. And you don't hear this talked about much, but I really think it's important because Kamala is the weak point of the Biden ticket, and a lot of the punditry on the right is saying, well, Biden's not going to die, but he's going to win. If he wins, then he's just going to step aside for health reasons, and Kamala's going to be president, or he might die. So you're not voting for Biden, you're voting for Kamala. I don't think that's going to be that effective because I just don't think people vote for vice president. I think they vote for president, but that's just my opinion. But having said that, I think that having someone you could go after and a woman on a woman is very important because a man just simply could not do that. So I think Elise Stefanik has shown her undying loyalty, her willingness to throw everything out the window, as I said, to be loyal. So I also think Sarah Huckabee Sanders would be a good choice because he's seen her in action. I didn't agree with her, but I thought, like Jen Psaki, I thought she was a skillful press secretary and did a good job in what is really a thankless role in any administration. I think J.D. Vance, I think that Ohio has become a reliably red state, so I would think he would be the least choice. I do agree with you that I think from a perspective of balancing the ticket the best, I think Tim Scott would be the best choice. I think he's very low key. He's not going to overshadow Trump. But I think the worry might be from the Trump camp. Well, here's a guy that the one thing he's lacking, the star power, and the reason he wasn't able to make it over the hump before, this is going to give him. So he might grow to outshine me. But that's just the insecure way that Trump thinks. So I would still say my bet would be Elise Stefanik first, and I think that Sarah Huckabee Sanders would be second. But it's going to be a very drawn out performance, whatever happens. And again, the old saying in politics is there are 10 reasons that you pick a vice president. The first is to help you win, and the other 9 don't matter. But then you turn that around and you look at Dan Quayle, and Kamala Harris's ratings were even lower than Dan Quayle's, which tells you something. And that didn't hurt Bush. George H.W. Bush, he was the last president to get over 400 electoral votes. So in the end, I don't think it's going to matter. But what are some?
Well, Dave, I'm curious. You mentioned the swapping in Kamala Harris. There's been some talk this week about the possibility of swapping in Michelle Obama at the last minute. Do you think there's any truth to that? And what's your? I'm not an expert on Democratic Party nomination rules. Would that even be allowed under the rules if the voters didn't vote for him or for Michelle Obama? Would she be able to last minute step in if at the very end that's what Biden says, oh, I'm bowing out for my health?
Well, I think what my scenario and what I would like to see happen, because I still, as you very articulately pointed out, any generic Democrat beats Donald Trump, any generic Republican beats Joe Biden, right? The whole country doesn't want this race. Over 70% of the country doesn't want this race. So my dream scenario is after the Republican convention, which is the middle of July, but before the Democratic convention, which is the end of August. So you have about a 5-week period. Biden has to step aside for health reasons. That way it could be decided at the convention. And by the way, some history here, that's the way it always used to be decided. The modern presidential primary process didn't really start until 1972. And it was a result of 1968 when we had that terrible the terrible riots in Chicago, and Hubert Humphrey was the nominee that year without getting a single delegate. Remember, because LBJ stepped down or said that he wasn't going to run on March 31st, 1968. So I think that would be the best way. Bring someone else in. And again, we can have a debate on another day as to who that would be, but that's what I'd like to see happen. But to answer your question, I do think that if he were to replace Kamala, which I wish he would, and I think Gretchen Whitmer would be the perfect person to do that. because she comes from a swing state. She won re-election very handily, beating Tudor Dixon. Also, she was the victim of that kidnapping plot, which I think even endeared her to some voters that might not necessarily support her. So I think she'd be a very strong candidate, and it would inject new life into the ticket, and it would also assuage a lot of the concerns people have about this. Biden wins and then he steps aside, so there at least be a capable person. But as I understand it, that would have to be confirmed at the convention, but I'm sure that would not be a problem. How would you like to see it play out?
That's interesting. That's really interesting history. I'm glad you shared that about the fact that the current primary process is very modern. I didn't realize that. That's very interesting. I mean, I think if you swap somebody out at the last minute, then yeah, I'm sure there'll be some pushback to say, well, nobody voted for this person. This is, the delegates, the the elites are choosing who we shall vote for. But I do think that given how deeply, deeply unpopular Joe Biden is, and he's not even that popular among Democrats, I don't think there'll be that many Democrats that would shed tears if that were to happen at the primary. So, I think Michelle Obama would be an intriguing choice. I think she can be quite polarizing. She seems to have a deep.
She's not interested. I can say with almost total metaphysical certitude, in the words of the great John McLaughlin, that's not going to happen. I think that's the last thing she would want to do. I don't think she would want to run for president. She certainly wouldn't want to be vice president. But that's
okay. Well, it sounds like you're talking like you've spoken to her recently, so that's interesting insider information.
I know people that know her, and just the word is that they're enjoying their lives, they being she and the former president. And I just don't think she would want to get into this hornet's nest at all. But
yeah,
I guess
interesting. Well, yeah. I think if they try to make it be Kamala Harris, I think that would be a strategic blunder by the Democrats. I mean, the fact that she did so incredibly poorly in the primary, her own Democrat voters did that. She's not popular with them. How much worse will it be for the general? So I think she would be a terrible choice. I think Gretchen Whitmer is actually quite polarizing because of COVID. A lot of people within the Republican base, she would be actually very motivating. In the way that Trump is motivating for a lot of Democrat-based voters, Gretchen Whitmer evokes a deep, visceral anger because of what she did to COVID. And then the fact that her husband was going around flouting all the rules around shutdown because the rules apply to her family differently than everybody else. I don't think it would be a good choice. I think they'd have to get somebody more like a Joe Manchin.
Yeah, I don't think that matters. I think the only reason that would matter, people are not going to hold COVID policies against a president because of the vice president's what the vice president did or didn't do. But I think the only difference.
No. I'm saying if Gretchen Whitmer was swapped in as the presidential nominee.
Oh, as the presidential candidate. Well, let's say that we definitely want to have that conversation. We don't have time today, but I'm saying as vice president, I think she would be a very solid choice. And I think the main reason that Biden would need to do it is to assuage the concerns that people have that when he gets reelected, or if he gets reelected, that he's going to step down and give Kamala the role. And again, Kamala, she's like Ron DeSantis. She's just not that good of a retail politician. And she's not that good of a politician. She's not stupid, but she's just incompetent when it comes to politics. And she's shown that over and over again. So we shall see. But I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there for today. But one thing this will not be, as one of my friends said, the country may be going to hell, but at least it's entertaining. So on that wonderful note, we will wish you a wonderful 2024. Thanks again for joining us on Practically Political. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield, and we will catch you next time.